I think true self-love isn't boasting, if because what is self-love, as we said in the last episode, it's self-acceptance. When you truly
For sure.
accept yourself, I don't think you need to boast to others. It's almost, I think that's more linked to an insecurity. When you're truly
Mm.
insecure about yourself and, you feel the need to show yourself off, if that makes
Pride is a
sense.
tool to do that, right? Pride is the tool to shine over
Mm-hmm.
others or to shine what is not perhaps there.
Welcome to the Sage Verse, with real works and true words. Patterns of recognition leave your brain converged. Time is irrelevant when the thoughts of impediment corrupt your soul with mind-numbing nemesis. The sage's way is where the truth hits the page. Turn your soul into a library in the name of knowledge and discovery. We seek out reality to be gone of human apathy.
Welcome to the Sageverse, where we explore the pressing questions of our age. My name's Jason, and today I'm joined by a good friend of mine and fellow founder of the channel, Hermes. How are we doing today, man?
Very good. Thank you, Jason. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. So, it's the topic of pride today.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, if you watch the first episode of this series, we're talking about the seven deadly sins, and we're going to kick things off with pride. So,
Mm-hmm.
I'll just share a few thoughts, and you can let me know what you think. Pride's an interesting one because it's one of those sins that, at first glance, we almost think of it as a virtue. We
Mm.
think that adults or fathers and mothers think they should be proud of their children. We should be proud of our work that we put in life. We should be proud of our achievements and all these different things. So
Mm-hmm.
it almost disguises itself as a bit of a virtue. So for it to be
Mm-hmm.
a sin, it's interesting to inquire why that might be.
Yeah.
Obviously, if we look at its opposite, which would be humility, it's easy to see how pride might come across then as something a little negative. What do you think
Mm-hmm.
about that?
Yeah, it very much does disguise itself as a virtue. Some people use it every day, like in everyday life. Like you said, parents saying, I'm
Mm,
proud of my children, look how good they did in their exam results. We're proud of our own self-achievements, our productivity. It doesn't seem on the surface as a sin, but I'm sure it's there for a reason, so we can kind of dive deeper into it. Even, as a society, it is Pride Month right now, so it does have like a
mm,
positive connotation to it. But in ancient kind of biblical sense, it's seen very much as a sin. So, why is that? So, just to kick things off, I'm going to just define pride, and then I'm going to read a quote on pride, and then see if we can kind of get to the bottom of it. So, the
awesome.
definition I've got, it's a feeling of deep pleasure or satisfaction derived from one's own achievements, the achievements of
Mm,
those with whom one is closely associated, or from the quality or possessions that are widely admired. Okay, so that's the definition. And with the quote, it's by John Stott, and the quote is, Pride is more than the first of the seven deadly sins. It itself is the essence of all sin. So
okay.
what does that quote kind of bring to mind for you?
Well, when I was thinking of pride for a second, it made me think that, what are the potential consequences that pride would lead to? And I suppose with that quote saying that it's the first of all sin, I suppose maybe pride also lends itself to thinking one is superior to others, perhaps, or
Mm-hmm.
by having a sense of pride, you're putting yourself on a pedestal that perhaps is undeserving.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there is sufficient pride in that you've achieved something and that you should look back at the hard work that you've put in and acknowledge that you really challenged yourself and you really succeeded in what you done or what you
Yeah.
did.
Do you think
And
it's linked to sorry to interrupt, but him saying it's
yeah,
the essence of all sin? Obviously, in a biblical sense, original sin was in regards to Eve, biting of the forbidden fruit and becoming self-aware. So it was kind of a separation from the Garden of Eden, where everything was kind of moving as oneness, no self kind of awareness, and then the tree of knowledge, gave her that self-awareness
mm,
that was kind of a separation between the kind of oneness of the Garden of Eden and then now herself, and is that where sin kind of originates from? The ego, the separation of the self from one's
it's a
environment?
very interesting point. Yeah, I suppose the the connotation of pride in oneself, to be able to think for oneself, to have the knowledge of good and evil, and to be proud of making your own decision and going against the word of God, not to eat the fruit from the tree of knowledge. I suppose a sense of pride can be dangerous in the sense that you can delude yourself a little bit if it's undeserving. And as you said, as the essence of all sin, well, what does that delusion then lend itself to? Are you going, if you're proud of something you've achieved, does that open the door for you to get away with? Does that open the door for you to then do things, or perhaps sin even more, or go down avenues that you wouldn't have if you were humble, so to speak? Does it make you think of taking on more? Cultivating greed and things like this.
We're saying it's the essence of all, like it leads to the others. If you see yourself as higher than others, then you see yourself as more deserving than others, which could be linked to greed.
Increases your desire, perhaps.
It could be linked to gluttony. I deserve more food than others. It is kind of that hierarchy ideology of, that rather than seeing humanity as one, we are one and the same, we are connected. It's kind of, it does create a level of narcissism in which you see yourself as more important than others. Perhaps it can lead to that anyway. It's not always that, but
I certainly agree. And pride almost necessitates a certain level of respect from others, but also if you see yourself in a higher light and you put yourself on a pedestal, then you are developing certain expectations which perhaps would not be there if you were humble. Now, the idea of humility is interesting, because they say that if you have achieved something in life, it's never good to gloat or boast about that. It's better to remain humble and to look back on what you've achieved with grace, not with pride. Because pride is that kind of thing which is, it really wants to shine what your achievement is. It really wants to almost gloat about it. And is there healthy pride? Who knows? The idea of pride seems to be self-glory, I think, which we touched on briefly in the last episode. The idea of self-glory and self-glorification, just really taking that to the next level rather than just appreciating what you have.
I personally think it's kind of like the shadow of true self-love, because I don't think those two things are the same. I think true self-love is very necessary, as I did discuss in our last episode. I think it's essentially the filling of the cup in which we can then allow to run off over to others. It's being selfish to the extent of fulfilling our own needs, and then we can fulfill the needs of others, so it kind of pours over. So I think that balance between selfishness, selflessness, but it's almost I think true self-love isn't boasting, because what is self-love? As we said in the last episode, it's self-acceptance. When you truly accept yourself, I don't think you need to boast to others. It's almost, I think that's more linked to an insecurity. When you're truly insecure about yourself, and you feel the need to show yourself off, if that makes sense.
Pride is a tool to do that, right? Pride is the tool to shine over others, or to shine what is not perhaps there, or to increase what actually is there. Yeah,
it's kind of to boost your own ego, because but you wouldn't need to do that if you were truly fulfilled in self-love, self-acceptance. You wouldn't need to boast yourself. You wouldn't need to feel pride and for others to kind of to show it off in a narcissistic fashion. Narcissus, as we said in the last episode, he'd stared into the river and fell in love with his reflection. But what he fell in love with was the aesthetic. It was the body. It was just how he looked. It wasn't his true essence, because we aren't our body. We aren't our sexual orientation. We aren't our political party. We aren't all these things which society currently, the identity politics, the things that it's getting us to cling on to, and all those things, funnily enough, are what separates us from other people, similar to the Garden of Eden. Yeah, it's a
Just
it's
to
a separation from one's own, from everything else when you have this level of self uh narcissism.
just to add on there, nationalism is a sense of pride of one's country, and as a consequence of that, by being nationalist, you are separating yourself from other nationalities, or you're separating your country from other countries because you're putting your country above others. Now, you could say that nationalism or that sense of pride in one's country is just that and is not compared to others, but where do we draw the line on that? Because that is almost like a sense of pride. And then if you're going down the route of, the individual and an individual mindset, this sense of pride in that individuality, thinking that, you should just be who you are and separate yourself from others. It's all separation. Pride almost leads to that separation.
It feeds off separation, yeah.
Translate in different forms, right? It can translate
But true love,
in the eye.
love and self-love feeds off connection, in contrast, connection with others, connection with oneself. So I think that's why I said it's like the shadow of true self-love. If anything, I think this month, perhaps should be called self-love month. It's a self-acceptance of yourself as a person and who you choose to love and who you choose to be. All that thing is, all of that is true, self-love. It should be about
Or
self-acceptance.
yeah.
But pride and the boasting of not just in regards to the LGBT in this month, but with everyday people, as we said, that are showing a level of pride with their children, with themselves, the boasting of one's accomplishments. You wouldn't need to do that if you had true self-love, self-acceptance, and peace within one's own self and in one's own skin. If you truly felt that level of peace, there would be no need for a boasting. So I would invite the viewers to essentially, if you find yourself doing that in any fashion, if you find your other people around you doing it in regards to you, maybe look deeper into that. Why do I feel the need to do that? Am I insecure in regards to this? Why am I insecure? Kind of go to the root of it, find peace with it.
100%. And that's the beauty of humility, because on one side you have pride, which is almost separating ourselves from others, whereas humility allows us to connect with one another because we can understand others when we're humble. Whereas if we're gloating and we're boasting and we have this degree of pride that is trying to embellish oneself, you're separating yourself from others. Whereas humility almost invites connection. It invites us for communication. It invites self-acceptance and the acceptance of others, I think. So humility and modesty is better.
And funnily enough,
sure.
There's actually a quote which is the exact vice versa quote from the original quote I gave, which was a Western quote, and this is actually an Eastern quote by Confucius, which is, "Humility is the solid foundation of all virtues." So in one aspect, pride is the essence of all sin, and humility is the essence of all virtue. So it's funny how, even on opposite sides of the worlds with opposite, philosophers and thinkers, they came to the same conclusion in the opposite. So there must be something there.
That's
These
the
things
beauty
don't
of
happen by
transhistorical
accident.
truths. Yeah, these transhistorical truths appear everywhere. You see in the West, you have ideas spring out, and then in the East you have similar ideas pertaining to the same subject, maybe a different angle, or in some cases the same angle, and that just adds a level of verity to the idea in itself. Maybe there is something true that is it's a truthful expression of humanity or who we are, right? Because that is what philosophers are trying to discover, is what aspects of what aspects of the self, but also the human condition are true across the board. Is there anything that can actually connect us on a, not a general level, but on a consistency level, where ideas or aspects of human nature repeat themselves, and these repetitions, do they signify some kind of truth that we are or we are not yet aware of? So the idea then that humility is the foundation of all virtue. Obviously, in the West, you have people like Xenophon thinking that Self-control is the foundation of all virtue, and I suppose humility and self-control, they go hand in hand in some regard. Where pride could be the absence of self-control in the sense that you are trying to embellish one's achievements or trying to increase the status of one's achievements. That's another thing. Statuses, titles, and things like this. People hold a lot of importance in these artificial things that we create in our society.
And funnily enough,
which they hold no real value in in the eyes of nature.
Yeah, no, 100% I agree. And like, I'm someone that, at work, I very much come across as a very human, person. I don't use my job title as my level of, what I put forward to others. I have, whether someone's a cleaner in the workplace, whether someone, is a receptionist, whatever their kind of job role, I very much just like to connect and and I'm always very friendly with everyone. I usually build a lot of friends in the workplace, but you do come across those people that, very much just embody their job role. There's no kind of human there. It's kind of going back to the Matrix. They're kind of the in-game character. There's someone that like, I'm above you, and they talk down to people, and, they cling on to that hierarchical structure. And I think there's a reason for that. As I said, it's a level of insecurity. They don't feel fulfilled in their own life. There's no level of self-acceptance in their own life. But, this thing they put above that, this a separate thing from who they truly are, this job title, is, they see that as better than who they are because of their lack of self-acceptance. So they push that forward and use it to kind of dominate over others because, again, of an insecurity within themselves. And whatever that thing is, the name badge is what I'm pointing to here, if anyone's wondering. All these things that we cling on to, all these masks, all these egos, we use them and boast about them and are proud of them because of a deeper insecurity within ourselves, a lack of identity with true self, a lack of identity, a lack of true self-acceptance.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't disagree with that at all. It's funny with statuses and titles. They actually have no importance in the eyes of nature. Just we as a society tend to appropriate certain competence with these titles. But, you can always tell what someone's character is by how they treat a cleaner, a waiter, a waitress. You can always tell what kind of person they are. And
agreed.
Being a well-mannered and moral individual, that separates us from our humanity. It's almost putting in that hierarchy or that barrier where you see yourselves not as a part of them, but almost as better than them or superior to them in some sense. Now, don't get me wrong, hierarchies are necessary to a degree, right? If we had no hierarchies, then we wouldn't have a functioning society. Yeah, it would just be a level of chaos, and there wouldn't be a functioning society. But the beauty of humility and virtue in general is that in that hierarchy, you have respect across the board, and you have a certain degree of responsibility to others. A leader is first and foremost a servant of others, rather than just seeing pawns and tools that they can use. So a leader is always able to do something that they tell someone to do. They wouldn't ask of another what they couldn't do themselves. We see this in the army and things like that, where soldiers that climb up the ranks and achieve higher ranks than others, they had to be able to do what they're telling people to do. And obviously there is respect and order and all these different things, because it seems that we naturally gravitate towards this kind of hierarchy, in the sense that we hold people in different light regardless of how we if we're conscious of it or not, because just from a human response. If Elon Musk walked in through the door, he would bring a certain degree of gravity with him, and he would light up the room in ways that someone else wouldn't. So, and people would respond to that with a different energy than they would do others. So
he's very much himself, Elon Musk. Like, he doesn't use his accomplishments or his title as the boasting of himself. He even gets himself in trouble quite often for someone at his level, like smoking weed on Joe Rogan's podcast, or being very outspoken about his mind in regards to the current kind of woke culture. He's someone that doesn't filter himself because of hold himself in a box because of the level he's at. And if I'm just going to touch on the army, as you brought that up, with the army, it's almost as though they want to get rid of that level of humanness I mentioned before, like I portray in the workplace, and they want the full embodiment of the title, the corporal, the lance corporal, the lieutenant, the captain. They want the full embodiment of that role, because it's not, I guess, in human nature, when you feel a connection to someone else, it's not in the human nature to murder that person if there is a level of love or love or acceptance or connection there, which comes from humility, as we said. So in order to do that, a lot of war is usually built on power, greed, money, and these soldiers are sent out there and trained heavily. They remove any level of humanness there. They, train them just to listen to the command of their superior, essentially, and to embody their role. And then by following that route, they will also increase their role. And so it's almost a training out of humanity and into a strict hierarchy structure, in order to, I guess, be a successful warrior or army.
Achieve the objective or whatever it might be, right? Mm-hmm. You can't really have free thinking, especially at those levels of execution, where execution is required. You can't necessarily have the degrees of free thought.
Yeah, and I think that's what it leads to. Narcissism. Sorry to interrupt. Narcissism leads to a level of lack of empathy for someone else, because you're identifying so much with this false identity that it almost disconnects you from everyone and everything else, and it can make you almost sociopathic. And I think a lot of people come out of the army very much there, and very much all that glory from the job title kind of fades away when society doesn't really, we've seen so many. I think there's a statistic, more American soldiers killed themselves after the Vietnam War than died in it. And that's just telling in itself, when their humanity slowly starts to come back to them after their intense training and what they were going through during that war. And, I guess the actions in which they did, they can't live with it anymore, so they take their own life. And this quite telling in a way. So what are the consequences of this obsession with identity, of all these different things that truly don't reflect identity of self? Because true self is beyond the ego. It's, if you dive deep enough, you'll find the thing that connects humanity, we find in everyone. It's a level of spirit which kind of connects everything and everyone, and that's kind of beyond the kind of masks that are separating us.
Yeah, and 98% of our DNA can be found in other aspects of nature, which is just another testament to the fact of this wholeness or this oneness that seems to exist beyond just individuality. Obviously in the West, we hold a level of pride in our individuality. We see ourselves as individuals, thinkers, and we come to our own. And this isn't
to target any group. I think everyone does have this.
Of course, I mean, I would say that you are, you're 100% an individual, as am I. Do you know what I mean? It's the case of, we have our own ways of thinking, but the idea of oneness, that we can all be our own individual, but we can all be part of this wider picture of the universe and our connectedness to it and the things within it. So I think that anything that tries to take that away or tries to separate us from others, and pride being one of them, is not a positive force for good, for sure. Yeah.
Well, just as I mentioned with the army, the people behind the army that are directing, this level of destruction for the purpose of power and self-gain, I think are also the people that are behind a lot of the group politics that we see today, whether it's just political parties, whether it is, race, whether it is sexual orientation. I think there are people very much pushing this into our entertainment, into our media, and I think that there is a reason for that. I think it's because they want us divided as a people. Together we are strong, divided we are weak. And, it's just something that's happened throughout centuries and millennia, divide and conquer.
Yeah, but even within the divisions, right, there are divisions in them. So, like, you'll have basically tribal warfare at the end of it. You'll have groups of individuals who associate with one another, but no longer have this united sense of self. Now, obviously, there is this move towards a global system where, there's this one world government idea, or the aim that we should aim for global justice and this interconnectedness. Now, it depends on as to what that actually means, and if that means a connectedness between everyone in the sense that we are all humans, or we are all of equal value. Whether that's what it actually means, or if it's
I don't think so.
It's difficult to see how that could be, if that's the true intention.
Yeah, they'll paint it as that, but I don't think that's what it will be. I think it will be a totalitarian, authoritarian state in which we are living under the rule of fewer and fewer people. Larger and larger groups being ruled by fewer and fewer people. We've been going in that direction for decades, and if you look back to that, happening, it's never kind of a pretty ending. I don't think, because I think communities should run themselves to an extent. Someone that lives within a community or overlooks a community has a better understanding of what that unique community needs. Whereas the further you separate that, rulers from, one country ruling over kind of others, that doesn't really make sense, because there are certain cultures, there are certain individualities that exist.
That's the thing, right?
Yeah. But not necessarily separating us. You can have an appreciation of culture, and we can have something that shows and we connect with each other, an appreciation of culture. That is true love and acceptance as well. But I don't think it's going in that direction personally.
It would almost be the removal of culture rather than the appreciation of a multitude of diverse cultures.
Yeah. It'll be a melting pot.
Yeah, the melting pot, but within the melting pot you have an almost synthesis of all cultures, which in the process of time slowly dilutes itself, where you can't identify any particular culture, which is the opposite of diversity. Because diversity is where you have different cultures still intact, almost, if you see what I mean.
I think if there's
the Italians, the Irish, the Germans, you have unique aspects to those particular cultures, and then there's no need for any kind of nationalism there, because nationalism being the negative aspect of or manifestation of pride of one's country, rather you could just have a global self-acceptance of one's own values, and a respect for each unique characteristics of those particular cultures. But that comes from levels of understanding that we should strive for in ourselves, and in our empathy for others. We should try to understand other cultures.
Yeah, I personally don't think if world peace, or that idea of utopia, I suppose, is ever possible, I don't think it will come from the top down, like a ruling over, this is how things have to be, we're going to control humanity into it. I don't think it's ever going to come from that direction. I think it will be from the bottom up. And I think to truly have that, these group identities, as we mentioned, they have something that is actually connecting and creating a level of peace, but within these groups. So I think there needs to be a kind of universal unifying factor that humanity begins to understand and begins to connect to, even if it's just in our humanity, that's what we're connected to. We all eat, we all drink, we all breathe, we all have blood within our veins, we all have, you know, a spirit within us that is beyond also the physical body, which has certain differences from each other. You know, there is definitely a unifying factor we have as a humanity, and I think if more of that is kind of promoted and that more of that is what we focus on, we will naturally feel more of a connection with each other. And I think that's how it's achieved personally.
100%. No, I agree with you there for certain. So, I think we've covered a lot there, Hermes. It's interesting, this concept of pride, because, you know, as I mentioned at the beginning, it is the sin that almost disguises itself as virtue. It's almost a sin that is able to, you know, surpass the barriers of society in some sense, where others are, you know, more easily recognizable. So yeah, I appreciate speaking with you today about that.
Yeah, I appreciate speaking to you too. And I just wanted to say thank you for everyone that is watching. If you can just slap a like on the video, it does help us, helps the algorithm get our content seen. So yeah, also if you could share with your friends, your family. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. And yeah, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Peace out.
Peace.
Welcome to the Sageverse. Please just observe the birth of this creative surge for the purpose to leave hatred purged and replaced with words that will make you learn to take your place on earth. And once you've taken your place and found your greatest of traits, cultivated the day, this will be making you say, this is the Sage's way.